Welcome to State of the Art Southern Illinois, a podcast by the Marion Cultural and Civic Center. Our guest today is Hugh DeNeal, founding member of the Woodbox Gang and the People Vs Hugh DeNeal. Listen as we discuss his history as a musician, his journey with the Woodbox Gang, and his current project, the People Vs Hugh DeNeal.
Speaking on a telephone, I hear your voice, and sinking out of time is your method of choice. I'm speaking on a telephone.
Hugh, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Josh. Thank you for inviting me.
So, you've been around Southern Illinois in the music scene for quite a while now.
It seems like it. Yeah.
But let's go back a little bit before that. How did you get into music in the first place?
I guess I was probably probably freshman year of high school, and my dad had he played a little bit of guitar and did some songwriting. He didn't pursue it too hard, but I had him to teach me some chords. He was doing a radio show for WEBQ in Harrisburg, and it was a pre-recorded show, but he played a lot of Bob Dylan songs and things. And I got, for whatever reason, at age 13, really taken with Bob Dylan in particularly. And so
That's a decent influence.
yeah, at the time, it was the early 90s. He wasn't putting his best work out at the time then, but I started thinking about and kind of being interested in songwriting and, in the folk song kind of way where three chords can take you a pretty far place. And so he taught me, I think, a D, a G, and an A, and I picked up a Mel Bay book and learned some more chords from there and started just trying to write my own songs. And, they were all very terrible, as they should be at that time. But I had some like-minded friends, as well as my brother. He got into playing bass. And so we played around, and got into, as well as the folk stuff, grunge and punk rock and things like that, that full drum sets and, loud amplifiers mixed in with that. And so we made some music and did some things. And so we were, I grew up in Harrisburg, and even in high school, from time to time, we'd come over to Carbondale to like the Soundcore Battle of the Bands and stuff at T-Birds, which is the bar underneath ABC Liquors over there, and then at the Hangar 9 as well. And so going over to the big city of Carbondale was a pretty exciting thing. Well, going back to high school and talking about it. And
what era was this?
I'm going to say 93, 95 or so. I graduated high school in 95. And also, yeah, it was around in there, and it just started when, we're able to drive and everything, coming over to Carbondale as often as possible just to kind of hang around and going over to Plaza Records and going over to Second Chance Records and things and buying a lot of music and just being a part of the cool college town, and we kept playing and doing some things, and then moved away in the late 90s for a couple of years, I guess. And I guess that was after I dropped out of SIU. Once I left, I started SIU right after high school, and was in the music program and did some things. And
what were you studying in the music program at that point?
Music business, actually. And so I had some fun classes that were pretty basic stuff as far as just introduction to piano and things, and learned a great deal about music theory, which I didn't apply too much before. And so one of my classmates was Alex Kurt, and we hung out a little bit and even wrote some songs together. And so I dropped out of school, moved away. He moved away for a bit, and then we both came back to Southern Illinois, and he wanted to form a band. And so my brother and I we're already kind of playing a little bit, and so we've got this thing we're calling it the Woodbox Gang. You want to come join this? Like, sure. And so, he was into some jug band kind of stuff with the washboards and gut bucket bass and some other stuff like that. And, with his talent coming into that, we really started heavy with the Woodbox Gang in, I guess, late 99, early 2000. And so
how did you guys come up with the name, the Woodbox Gang? Where did that come from?
Well, there's an old picture of my brother and I that my dad took. I'm probably 4. My brother's probably 6, and we were actually sitting in the wood box. We had wood burning stoves, and so we were small enough to both be able to sit in there. And he just thought it was a nice picture, and so he called the picture the Woodbox Gang. Growing up and all, and I thought it always kind of stuck with me. But then it also was like the acoustic instruments, the hollow wooden boxes, and gang sounded kind of fun. That it was, there's a handful of bands that use gang, but not too many, and it just seemed fitting, and it stuck pretty good.
Well, and it was a notable title, like, it's something that stuck with you after you heard of the Woodbox Gang.
That's cool. That's what we were going for. So we felt pretty good about it.
And it also gave almost like a sentimental feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like something that comes into my mind from just the phrasing of the Woodbox Gang is like the Little Rascals,
right?
And it's just a fun thought and a fun feel that comes along with just the name itself before we even get to the music.
Right. Yeah. That in some ways it might even be a little disarming compared to some of the music we've made and all, and that's kind of fun, especially even in traveling on the road as we did for a while. Some folks might not know what they were in for just by the name itself, and that was always pretty fun.
Yeah.
Especially when you're somewhere far away from home and playing to people who've never heard you before.
And so Woodbox Gang was just a 3-piece, or was there a 4th member there as well?
It fluctuated. Early on, there was, I think, as many as 7, which was, and we kind of trimmed things down. By the end of our touring, it was a 4-piece. And other than some songs with a washboard, we didn't have percussion. Alex played some songs with a washboard and a stomp box, or a kick, to have a kick drum sound, but it was a hollow suitcase that he had a kick pedal applied to. In previous incarnations, we did have a full drum set drummer from time to time, and sometimes even on the albums. But as far as the end core group, it was a 4-piece, and so
it sounds like
easier to fit in the van.
From a audio standpoint, it sounds like it would be a very different feel with a full drum kit really kind of engaged the entire time.
It did make a different sort of a sound, and in some ways, it could almost put us into that jam band genre, which we played a lot of jam band festivals and things and all, which was fine because we added a little bit of diversity in there, but the drum set and the full drums kind of put us in there more than the sparse percussion. It was more instrument driven, and the drums have a way of overpowering some things without the right kind of precision, and by just having minimal drums, we were able to make some more subtle sounds and things that were pretty effective like that.
And the newest iteration of a stomp box is just literally a little square that you step on.
Yeah, there's some things like that. Yeah,
and I've just recently come across those with some of the touring groups that have come through.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that I love about the technology of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, as you're looking at the stage, you kind of sit there and go, where in the world is that sound coming from?
Exactly. And, it's kind of fascinating when you can see the suitcase that Alex had. You could see it move, it had a hole cut in for it for a microphone to be able to go in as needed, but it would vibrate and all. But it certainly didn't look like an instrument when you're hauling stuff in. It looks like a thing that holds equipment, And so, the thing with a stomp box, you can be playing another instrument and not just happen to be the drummer playing. And so they do seem to be a lot more popular in the last several years. The one-man band kind of thing, you see a lot of that for sure. And that's been interesting to see over the recent years that becoming more of a common thing.
Yeah, but you guys started with it a long time ago.
22 years ago or something like that. So
pretty far ahead of the curve on that one.
I like to think so, you know.
And now they sell suitcases with a drum head built into them, and
right.
And it's become a, you know, not a suitcase that you've cut a hole into yourself, but it's become an actual quote unquote instrument that you can buy that looks like a suitcase.
Yeah. And there were sound people out on the road that were so, you know, they were so skeptical before they hooked it up to think, what kind of junk did you bring in here for me to mic up? And they were really impressed at the sound that came out of the suitcase. And so,
because I assume back then it was pretty few and far between that any of them had ever mic'd up a suitcase.
Exactly.
And even the sound of micing up a suitcase sounds kind of preposterous, but
yeah. And it has to be a vintage suitcase. These days, that's you won't get too far with these cloth things on wheels. But you know, finding the vintage suitcases, that's where the sound is.
That's really cool. How did you guys land on the sound that was the Woodbox Gang?
I mean, it was kind of a mix between some old-timey roots music and folk music and jug band stuff with a thoughtfulness towards, you know, some punk rock and things. And early on, we used to do a number of covers but we would play Ramones songs and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. You know, there's this 20-some years ago, I think the genre has gotten very old and tired, but the idea of playing heavier music from an acoustic position, you know, some people have made a career out of that. The novelty of that goes fairly quickly, gets a little old and sour. But at the time, people really got a kick out of that. And
I feel like the most recent iteration of that, with mass popularity, would be Postmodern Jukebox, who took a number of modern music, modern hits, and have taken them back into the jazz era.
Okay.
And play them as big band jazz.
Okay.
And with mass popularity.
Right. Yeah, that's probably a little more sophistication than just, playing AC/DC songs as a bluegrass band. You know, that's it's amusing for about 10 minutes. And then it's like, all right. Where the shtick is what holds it together as far, and then, you know, but early on we did some of that, and that was okay. We used to play I believe it was the Gourds were the band that first did it. The song "Gin and Juice," the Juice, the Snoop Dogg tune, but played in a bluegrassy, rootsy way. That, you know, it was very fun. But a lot of other bands did it as well, and we certainly were not the first, but we definitely early on kind of capitalized on that. But, you know, after a bit, it does feel like a silly novelty and all. But by doing some of that, I think. When we moved towards, you know, just doing all of our own stuff, I think it kind of had an influence on mixing the roots music with heavier, punk influenced things, and because that's the music we listen to, but both stuff, things like that, you know, and it wasn't a conscious effort, but it just seemed like what we were naturally driven to, kind of making more of a hard edged. People called us bluegrass, which I don't know was accurate, but it was okay. A harder edged approach than some other folks who were making some, you know, perhaps lovelier sounds, you know, and but it kind of worked out for us in getting hooked up with Jello Biafra on the Alternative Tentacles, you know, iconic record label that, you know, has of course plenty of punk rock stuff, but a great deal of rootsy Americana stuff as well. And so I think he liked where we were coming from, and there's a drive for authenticity that we were going for that I think resonated. And so mixing those worlds, playing a bluegrass festival and then going the next day and playing some kind of a club out on the road, that it was pretty cool to be able to do both of those things. And
so which came first there, going out on the road or the label? And how was one or the other prompted afterwards?
Well, we were out on the road before Alternative Tentacles first re-released our album Drunk as Dragons. And so we'd been touring pretty heavily for a few years at that point. We initially met Jello because he came to SIU to give a talk back in, I believe it must have been 2002 or 2003. And that night we had a show at Hangar 9. And so I was kind of bummed because I wanted to go hear his talk, But fortunately, some friends encouraged him to go check out the band that was playing at the Hangar 9. And as a matter of fact, that was a night we were playing as a benefit for the Charlie Berger documentary that WSIU was going to produce. And so, but he was impressed with the band. He was nice, just a nice guy. And we gave him all of our, albums. I think we had 2 or 3 at that time, and kind of stayed in touch over the next several years. And then they started selling our old albums on consignment online at the Alternative Tentacles site. And we wound up on a tour, took us out there to San Francisco. And so he came out to the show, and we wound up, he said, do you have a place to stay tonight? Well, not really. Like, well, you've got plenty of room. You're welcome to stay at my place. So we hung out there, and I got a little too much to drink in me, and was just asking obnoxious fanboy questions about the dead Kennedys till I finally passed out, I think. But after that, just hanging around, he decided he really wanted to re-release our album Drunk as Dragons. And so we talked about that, and they put up the money and insisted that we had to print the lyrics in there, and we had to fill up all the time on the CD. So we did some old songs and did some re-recordings of them. And that was a great relationship. It was, got a lot of press and a lot of radio out of it. But that was a result of touring, but then kind of maintaining that relationship that was serendipitous for him to have done the talk at SIU back years before. And so it was some pretty fortunate timing.
Yeah, that's great. And so you said that touring came before that. At what point did you go from being a local Carbondale band, Southern Illinois band, to saying, we're going to go out on the road and we're going to give this a shot?
It was about 2005. Now, prior to that, for a few years, we had playing as many weekends as possible, going out of town and playing weekends. And we had a booking agent who, he was a fan, and he said, I've got this festival, this kind of anchor festival in Montana. And there's a couple of pretty decent shows. I can get you right around there. But in order to make this make any sense, you're going to need to be out for several weeks. And honestly, if you guys are not at this point ready to make your move and basically change your whole situation and quit your full-time jobs that are holding you to do things, I'm not going to put all this work into making this big tour happen. And so it took some contemplation. And
well, that sounds like a pretty scary leap.
It was. And not everybody in the band did it. And so the band changed some members. And so that was kind of a heavy thing. But, we went out and we did, for that first tour for about a couple of months or something like that. Took us to a lot of different places. And we did pretty good, It worked out pretty well. And so we were, of course, looking forward to the next one and the next one. And we did that for a few years, and
well, and I think a lot of people hear being a touring musician and think of a big glamorous lifestyle and think of, oh, it must be great to be out on the road, just cruising from city to city. And there was a scene last night. We had, we're recording this the day after the Robert Cray band played here. Mm-hmm. world-class musicians, and there was about 2.5 hours between the end of their show and the time that the bus left.
Right.
Took an hour to get their gear out for the crew to load everything up, load the bus up. But then after that, some of the band members and crew members, as I was, we were wrapping up the night, I saw them. They had a little Bluetooth speaker, and they were literally sitting on the back steps of the building, with drinks in some solo cups by a dumpster.
Yeah.
And that was their party, and that was their festivity for the night before they had to hop in their bunks and sleep while they were on the road.
That sounds pretty luxurious.
Yeah.
A whole hour to drink by the dumpster.
and to me,
common.
that was the epitome, because you've got these world-class musicians, and the highlight of their night is going to be, sitting there with the solo cup and a Bluetooth speaker, enjoying each other's company next to a dumpster.
Yeah, that definitely rings a bell. There were times, you would play a show and be done at a bar or somewhere, that would close down at 2:00. Like, I'd take an hour or whatever to load out, an hour and a half or whatever. And the next show was, 8 or 12 hours away that you really had to, drive through the night to make it. And the glamour and luxury and the freedom and all that those ideas that you might have in your mind before you actually are doing it it doesn't tend to work out that way so much. It's a lot of driving or riding and seeing a lot of things that you don't get to stop and enjoy. As when possible, if we were out west, we would make a point we are going to drive through this national park to get where we don't have a lot of time to spend, but we are going to see these redwood trees. We are going to see these mountains, and but you're not seeing it from the most comfortable positions, and I can't even imagine riding on a bus to do that. It was in a van, and so. Yeah, it is a different kind of a lifestyle than a lot of people would imagine.
And it takes a real dedication to your craft and to your passion to pursue it and to be willing to put yourself in that position and to travel and to live like that.
For sure. And if the shows aren't rewarding in some way, then it can be a very unpleasant lifestyle for sure. Or if people are not getting along, or somebody's having a harder time than somebody else, it can be kind of grueling at that point. So it takes the right people to be close knit enough on the road, often far away from home, and relying on each other to make it. And if it's not the right kind of personality, it's going to be trouble. We had pretty good luck overall, though.
I was talking to Steve Hornbeek out of Anna, and he was saying that in all of his years traveling and touring with huge artists, there are hundreds and hundreds of people that have the talent to be able to tour with artists, but it's having the personality that matters.
Yeah.
And being able to spend months on end with each other.
Exactly. Those are the people that are doing it. Yeah. And it's not the people necessarily with the most talent, or at least the most talent is not the person that you want to be with if they don't have what it takes to endure the stuff.
Yeah.
And
so how long did Woodbox really do the tour lifestyle? You started in around 2005?
Yeah, so really, only about, I guess, 4 years or so. It all came to an abrupt end in October of 2009. And so, but, there were some tours, that, where you could take off work take your vacation or whatever for a couple of weeks. That stuff starting in 2003 or 4 and all, but then doing it full time from 2005 on. So I guess just 4 years. But, a lot of miles on the road, a lot of great shows, a lot of great memories, and I definitely have no regrets of those times.
So, the current project that you're really here to talk about today is the People Vs Hugh DeNeal.
Mm-hmm.
And you are getting ready to release your second album
Yes.
under the People Vs Hugh DeNeal.
That's correct. First album we did in 2019, a CD called Gas Station Sandwiches. And this is a 7-inch vinyl, a 33 RPM speed, 2 songs on each side, and it's through River to River Community Records. And so this is the first time I've ever had any vinyl whatsoever. I mean, we talked Woodbox Gang for years about doing some vinyl, but it comes with a price tag to do that. So this is a 4-song, 7-inch vinyl called Ope. Ope is the title. And
How very Midwestern.
oh, yes. And these are songs they wrote during pandemic lockdowns and all that, for the most part in 2020. And so, but it's full band on it, and a little bit of a different kind of a perspective than some of the, than the previous People Versus album. This is a song, or these songs are not about going places and doing things, because nobody was doing that at the time. And it really is kind of more so than previous songs and things I've been involved with, kind of reflective and thinking about perspectives as opposed to a story of somebody going and doing something. And so a lot of it comes out of staring at screens and watching the world kind of go crazy in a lot of different ways, as it did 2 years ago and to this day to a certain degree. But it kind of comes from that, and how people were dealing with a world that was upside down for the first time in 100 years regarding a global pandemic, and the elements that came out of that, and how people react to each other, and definitely the social media influence of it and all. So I think overall it's a good collection of songs that I think people are going to enjoy, and we'll be putting that out here this week and having our release on October 2nd in Carbondale at PK's. Our friends the Whistle Pigs are going to be opening up the show, and so
They're a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, great folks, great band, and getting to play with them is a rare treat.
Mm-hmm. So, what I love about this album and this project is that it's really come out of the pandemic, which is from early on in the pandemic, when whenever people were locked up in their houses, all of a sudden all the musicians were off tour.
Mm-hmm.
Local musicians didn't have anywhere to play. The bars weren't open. The restaurants weren't open.
Right.
There was a parallel drawn in my mind to the Black Plague,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Renaissance period that came after that.
Yeah.
And so I love hearing that your music came out of it, which I'm assuming pandemic or not, you would have been writing music anyway, but the pandemic literally kind of changed the way that you were approaching your music.
Yeah.
Because you were at home, and it created that introspection.
For sure. I will say that several of these songs came out of what was called closed mic night. And it was, it used to be Tres Hombres up in Carbondale. Every Tuesday would be open mic night. And it was a good gathering place for a lot of folks, local musicians and people that would just be able to come and play some music. And then you just hang out with your friends and your people, and people would play with each other and do things, or play a new song or an old song, and it was just a good time. So when everything got shut down, they started doing it by way of Facebook, and so the hashtag closed mic night. And so every Tuesday, a whole lot of us would put out videos, and so it would always be supporting some kind of a local need. And of course, when the pandemic started, there was all kinds of, whether it was a Good Samaritan House or, the warming center and everything that just needed money and funds. And so on Tuesday, you would see so many videos come out of things, and I wanted to just make sure that I had a new song, and I didn't keep it up, but that deadline of coming up each Tuesday, several of these songs came out of it. And so while the pandemic had its own inspiration for some things, having a deadline when everything sort of shut down, it really was a catalyst to make there be the songs, and I was playing them solo, but as time went on, we would get together and be at far ends of some room, masked up and playing and working on the stuff, and eventually got to that point, or outdoor rehearsals, which was kind of fun if the weather was okay, setting up some drums in somebody's driveway or whatever. We do what you got to do, otherwise you just go crazy. But that's where several of these songs came out of, that deadline of putting out a video for the closed mic night. So that's a fun thing to be a part of, and it's still going on. At least it's back to in person. So
yeah,
and it always supporting some kind of a local need, for tips and things.
and I love what you said about the deadline and that how much a creative person when put under pressure can really find a groove.
Yeah.
And really crank something out.
Oh yeah. If you have all the time in the world, that's not very helpful, I've found. It's almost like if you book time in a studio, you have to rearrange your life to make sure to be able to do that and go be productive while you're there and get something done. It costs money, it has time, there's limitations. You're probably going to be have some pretty good results. If you live in a studio, or if you live in a place that it's always there, it's always available, you don't tend to get a lot done. I've found in myself as well as others talking about that. But having that deadline, it is kind of crucial. The albums are gonna be back from the manufacturer. We need to have a cover. Okay, we got 3 weeks to figure it out. Let's do this. All right, cool. I think we got it. All right. The show is in a week. We need to make sure we're up on this song. Okay, and just stuff like that. And when there's reasons to be held accountable, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
For everybody.
So what for you, stylistically, personally, what is the difference in tone and feel between People Vs Hugh DeNeal and your longtime project Woodbox Gang?
Well, I mentioned Alex Kurt before, and he played a lot of percussion and a lot of other instruments and things, and he's a great singer and arranger, and he kind of made Woodbox Gang have this kind of heavier drive of a sound, I think. There are some People Versus songs that and some solo songs that didn't cut it as Woodbox Gang songs. Not because they were not good, but it just didn't really fit with the sound we're going for in Woodbox Gang. And that was a very strong collaboration in Woodbox Gang with Alex and myself. And that's, I think, how that sound came about. His skill sets and mine molded together pretty good. Whereas the People Versus, the musicians are incredible, and play in ways that a lot of people don't. But it's not as much of a push and pull, I guess. We we are doing almost everything is a good idea, and and there's nothing that's really cut. It's almost like, I guess, if your name is in the band itself, everybody is pretty well assuming that I know what I'm doing, for better or for worse. And people don't really feel like, Hugh, this song sucks. What are we doing here? Let's just scrap this and do. Nobody's saying that, even though maybe there's times that they should. But the sound itself, I think, is less of a hard driving punk rock rhythms. There's less of that in the People Vs band, and I don't know that there's. I'm saying either one is better or not. It's just different, and it's kind of exciting.
To kind of touch on what you were saying, there really is kind of an ease to the sound and the feel of People Vs. When I started listening to it just today, I was taken back. My wife and I traveled to Ireland 8-9 years ago.
Okay.
Spent a couple weeks there. Every evening we had a meal in a tavern or the neighborhood pub.
Right.
And there was always music.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an ease to that music in that pub.
Yeah.
And the feel and the sound of your music, it isn't necessarily, it is an Irish music. It is an Irish pub music, but it's got that same ease to it. And it took me back to that exact same feeling.
Very cool.
Of traveling through Ireland, and to where that music is so woven into their everyday culture,
right?
That it's just easy and it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the feeling I got whenever I hit you on Spotify and started listening to it and got into it. And I never lost that feeling throughout your last album and then the single that you've just released.
Very cool. I've always been a big fan of, the folk music of the 60s that, the Irish bands like the Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem and the Dubliners and all that. We used to listen to that kind of stuff a lot. And we used to play some Irish tunes and all. And like at the Yellow Moon Cafe in Cobden on a St. Patrick's Day, and we would play under the name Pete Moss and the Blarney Brothers, and we played Irish tunes, and but also a huge fan of the Pogues, and they really combined some of that kind of traditional Irish music with with punk rock and things, and so some of those rhythms of like the songs in a 3/4 time, or kind of a stilted jig or whatever, it's kind of ingrained in me a little bit.
Yeah.
It's definitely there's an instinct there.
You can really hear that influence coming through, and I loved it. It's great.
I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate it.
And it, like I said, I just love it's just so easy to listen to, and there's an ease to it, and there's something comfortable about it.
Well, I'm glad to hear, and we're very proud of it, and proud of the music on. And the arrangements, and there's Greg, who plays the drums. He plays bass in Woodbox Gang, and he is an excellent arranger, down to some minutia of things that I would never even think about. A small little change that seems almost superficial on the surface, and then you do it, and it's like, wow, that's really good. That's a really good thing that I would have never thought of. And so there was definitely some tinkering with the arrangements of these songs. The four from the new record. If you jumped back 2 years to see my old video of me playing them for a closed mic night when they'd been about a week old, vastly different from the full band that we arrangement and what we have on the record. And so I wouldn't want to say there's no collaboration on the People Vs stuff, but that's fun, and it's cool that you kind of picked out some of that Irish influence of that, because that's some iconic songs.
And even
in the past,
in some of your vocal phrasing, it's there as well. And
okay,
it's really awesome.
I appreciate that.
So this weekend, October 2nd.
It's Sunday. It's not
Sunday, October
not a
2nd.
typical day for music at PK's, but it'll be earlier. I think 7 or 8. The whistle bigs are going to start, and then we'll play on. Don't have to close down the bar at 2, but you're of course welcome to hang out and have fun after. But yeah, this Sunday, October 2nd.
And when is the actual album release through River to River? Is that all at the same time? Is that all coordinated for Sunday, or?
Yeah, yes, or if it's not actually Friday, the day before. We have the single out on Spotify right now. I believe it'll either be a couple of days ahead, or it'll be actually on Sunday that you can get it digitally live. And of course, we'd love to put a physical copy into everybody's hands as well.
Yeah, and I'll link to the River to River Community Records site where they can buy that vinyl once it's released. So Sunday, October 2nd, for sure, they'll be able to find it there.
Oh, yes.
And we'll link to your People Vs Hugh DeNeal
that'd be great.
Facebook as well. And I really look forward to hearing this full album come out.
I think you'll enjoy it. I think you definitely will. And can I say the following week is an exciting show with the Little Grassy Get Down at Touch of Nature. Both Woodbox Gang and the People Vs will be playing. This will be the Woodbox Gang's first show in 3 years. So, and for the first time I've seen a couple of those guys in 3 years. So if check out the Little Grassy Get Down, Touch of Nature, October 7th through the 9th. And it'll be a great time. And a lot of great musicians playing that too.
Wonderful. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Thanks for coming over here. We appreciate you, and I really enjoyed hearing your journey through music in Southern Illinois.
I appreciate it, Josh. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you for joining us for State of the Art Southern Illinois, a podcast by the Marion Cultural and Civic Center featuring local artists, artisans, musicians, arts organizations, and arts events in Southern Illinois, as well as touring artists coming to the Marion Cultural and Civic Center. Special thanks to Hugh DeNeal for his time speaking with us today, and a special thank you to Wingtips for providing this episode's soundtrack. Join us every Thursday morning for a new episode on Facebook, YouTube, or whatever audio podcast service you prefer. And now for Shrinking by Wingtips in its entirety.
Speaking on a telephone, I hear your voice, and sinking out of time is your method of choice. I'm speaking on a telephone, I hear your voice, and sinking out forcing tears, but I don't know why. Blind guidance you gave to me, I followed